Hi, so today I'm going to be talking about structure, agency, and power. And I'm going to use what we learned in class to analyze two works that we have previously read about um, Oliver Raw, Jihad and Death, and also Terror in France by Kepel. And I can't pronounce his first name, sort of. Anyways, so in these two books, the authors try to explain the rise of jihad and terrorism in France in the past couple of years. But before I talk about this, I'm going to speak about, structuralism and start off with structuralism. So basically, structuralism looks at society as a whole and doesn't place a lot of significance on the individual. As Bourdieu says on his paper Social Space and Symbolic Power, he says that, and I quote, Durkheim is no doubt, together with Marx, the one who expressed the objectivist position in the most consistent manner. We believe this idea to be fruitful, he wrote, that social life must be explained not by the conception of those who participate in it, but by deep causes which lie outside of consciousness. So this is basically the gist of structuralism and I guess objectivism, where there's a belief that within the whole culture there's something going on that the individual does not know or realize that's happening. And if you apply this to a society, then you have a theory which kind of tries to explain the way society works and why it works and how it works this way and why it works this way, as opposed to explaining the interactions between single individuals. So basically these people believe, the structuralists, that there lies something that's observable from the outside, but once you're in the inside, it's not so easily observable. And then on the other hand, you have as Bourdieu calls them, the subjectivists, which take it to the other extreme, to where the individual is the one that constructs his own reality. And he gives an example, ethnomethodologists, people who do ethnologists, who kind of go undercover and try to explain a social theory or problem from within the inside of the group. So, for example, maybe someone's trying to explain crime, and a subjectivist would, go inside the crime circle and try to understand where these people are coming from and why they make these decisions, as opposed to a structuralist kind of viewing crime as a whole from the outside and explaining why crime exists within a society and what good crime does and the way society constructs crime. Yeah. So now that I kind of explained this part, I want to go ahead and talk about the two writers that I mentioned in the beginning. And I'm going to start out with Kepel. To me, Kepel is, well, he's a sociologist, but to me, his argument of why people, or why these teenagers or younger, not teenagers necessarily, but the younger people, and why they're attractive to jihad or acts of terrorism. And, he gives an argument for a sociological, structuralist viewpoint. So to him, these people that join these groups are not just necessarily the children of immigrants. They're also children of French people who convert to Islam. the children convert to Islam and they have no immigrant background from Muslim countries. And he gives two explanations for this. In regards to the children of Muslim immigrants, he talks about a rise in unemployment and less opportunities for these people to live or to gain, I guess, meaningful employment or to have a meaningful life. And by this, I mean it's hard for them to get a job. It's hard for them to go to the university. And they live in neighborhoods. And this is another thing that he talks a lot about, the Benlees. And, you know, this from a sociological perspective, the ecology. So the ecology influences the behavior of individuals. So you have people coming from who live in these neighborhoods where there aren't government, like there's not a lot of help from the government. There aren't any youth organizations that they might reach out to youth, and there is this growth of discontent among these people who live in these neighborhoods, and this creates sort of like a negative structure where you just can't be. It's hard to be, I guess, like a normal law-abiding citizen where you get up every morning and you go to work and you have a family and you have all these things that is a symbol of, I guess, a successful life. And the children of immigrants who live in these banlieues don't have these opportunities, so they turn their anger towards the system, the French system. And I'm just gonna jump off and they're more prone to join these extremist organizations and turn to other forms of extremist Islam that might say that you have to, commit these acts of terrorism against these people who have given you nothing. So basically, that's Kepel's argument. And he gives a lot of examples of cities and neighborhoods where all the manufacturing jobs have gone, and there's discontent among the Muslim immigrant community and their children. But he also talks about Durkheim and social enemy. So basically, it doesn't just affect these people in these banlieues. It also affects French people. And he also says that the disorganization of society has created this social distance where people just feel alienated. And that's why you see a lot of converts who aren't necessarily, they don't come from a traditional immigrant background, but he gives an example of this one, a Jewish family, and their son converts to Islam, and he goes to fight in Syria, and he tells them that he's going to go do humanitarian work, and then he ends up being like a translator for ISIS and doing all these things, and he's killed in battle eventually. But he comes from a Jewish family who's is relatively not well off, but in a comfortable position in society. But then he lives in the society where basically it's disorganized, where maybe religion or there aren't any youth activities, or there's no interaction between people anymore. You become secluded, and this eventually, Durkheim said that this would eventually lead to societies that act like this, to higher rates of suicide. But what's happening in France is that these people are turning towards terrorism or jihadism. And then, so that's Kepel's argument, which I think is a structuralist argument. And he gives a lot of examples, social ecology and structuralism, Durkheim, enemy, all these great things. And on the other hand, you have Roy or Ra, where he talks about jihad and death in his book. He gives a typology of, I don't remember exactly, I believe it's 100 or 120 uh, people who go from France to join ISIS in Syria. And so he gets all these people's names and he gets their background, and he says that he doesn't mention Kepel, but it's a jab at Kepel. He's like, well, there is really no sociological or economic uh, similarities between these people who go and commit jihad or who go to and join ISIS in Syria. And he gives an example of a lot of these people who are lone wolf attacks, or the people who one of the persons who shot and killed a police officer and then went around shooting Jewish synagogues, and other profiles of these these terrorists and jihadis. And he points out that a lot of these are, they're educated. They don't necessarily come from a bad neighborhood, or their parents have comfortable jobs, but they're all different. He's saying that they're all different, and to me, Ra gives this post-structuralist interpretation of what's going on in these. It's a post-structuralist interpretation of the increase of terrorist attacks or jihadi attacks inside France committed by it's people who grew up there, and there's a difference because Roy singles out the individuals and their social background, their social capital, kind of like like Bourdieu talks about the habitus. So basically, Ra is explaining their habitus, their social position, their observable social position, and at the same time the things that their social capital. So their parents, education, their economic status, and all these things that make an individual, as opposed to Kepel, he gives more like a structuralist point of view of why there are a lot of increase of terrorist and jihadi attacks in France. And to me, Ra's argument is very interesting. He's not completely a subjectivist. He gives, towards the end of his book, he starts saying that, yes, these people are different and they don't, for example, so a lot of the attackers in his study, he talks about the Islamification of radicalization. So it's not that Islam is radicalizing these people to commit acts of violence. It's just that these people are already radicals, and they're just embracing Islam as like the new thing to embrace. So it's not that that Islam is radicalizing them. They are the ones radicalizing Islam. So this is an interesting point in Ra's argument. So basically, you have it's this agency of the individual to change the way a religion is interpreted, as opposed to a religion defining the individual. So from a subjectivist point of view, that's a very interesting reversal of roles, where the individual begins to, for example, in these cases, the individual begins to radicalize the religion, whereas, maybe before, when our societies weren't as individualist as they are now in the West, I would say that the religions were the ones, creating these ourselves. But now what's happening is that we are the ones creating or influencing this religious discourse. So, yes. I was going to talk about Foucault. But now, yeah. So basically, Kepel was a structuralist, Ra is a post-structuralist, and you start seeing the reversal of this growing sense of agency amongst individuals to define the religion that they wish to interpret, as opposed to the religion defining the individual. This could probably lead to a discourse on Foucault, but this video is already too long. So, thank you.